Thank you all for joining us for this second instalment of the Experience Experts Conversation series. I'm Katarina Grant, Director of Kat&Co, and together with a team, we've created this series of in-depth conversations with thought leaders and culture setters to inspire and to challenge the way that we experience, to share ideas, and to ignite creativity amongst our clients, our collaborators, and our friends, and to ultimately build hope and optimism for the future. I really believe that through times of adversity and uncertainty, there is a great opportunity to transform and to create a new path forward, one that I believe will see us as humans and as a creative industry thrive more than ever before. As a team at Kat&Co, we are committed to exploring how things can be better, how they can be more sustainable, how they can be more transportive through both the experiences that we create, as well as the environments that we design, and to connecting with people on a deeper level. So today we continue this series with a subject that we are deeply connected to and inspired by: the new spatial experience. Now, we will explore how our current circumstances will influence the way that we design, the way that we experience, and the way that we explore spaces, both in the public space as well as private, through physical and social interactions, and be a catalyst for a reimagining of spatial design and experiences in the future. So it's my pleasure to introduce spatial design expert Kelvin to share his knowledge and insights into what he believes the new spatial experience will be. Now, Kelvin is a founding director of global spatial communications practice, Akin Atelier, spanning retail, hospitality, hotels, resorts, public spaces, set design, as well as private residential projects. His clients and his collaborators are truly global. They include Qantas, Merivale, Dion Lee, Camilla and Mark, Saturdays NYC, the Australian Ballet, and Japan's Transit Group. So the centre of Kelvin's approach to design is a curiosity for bringing spaces to life, with a commitment to shaping meaningful experiences and positive impacts on the people who inhabit and occupy these spaces. What sets Kelvin apart is his belief that a successful spatial design merges a narrative with contextual, historical, social reference points, with physical spatial qualities, whilst expressing the DNA of a brand and creating an emotional response or connection for the audience, something that really resonates with us at Kat&Co as well. So, Kelvin, so glad that you could join us.
Hi, Kat. Thanks for having us.
How are you?
Really well, thanks. How are you?
Really good. I can see you're in the studio at the moment.
Yeah, in the studio today. It's quite a few people in here, so it's nice to be in here, and super excited for our chat today.
Probably nice to be back working with a team, right, in the office.
Yeah, definitely. Sorry, I lost you there. It's great to be back in the office. It's been an interesting few months. It's been 3 pretty hard, solid months of, kind of reassessing everything and adjusting, but there's been some incredibly positive outcomes that we've discovered, both internally and also with our clients. So it's been a nice journey,
Well, I look forward to sharing some of that today. Listen, I just want to start, Kelvin, by asking you a little bit more, I guess, about your experience and how you've gotten to where you are. Now, your portfolio is extremely diverse in the projects that you work on, from hospitality and retail, public spaces, set design, as well as I know you do private residential projects. Can you share with us a bit about how you came to be where you are now as an Australian leading designer?
Definitely. I mean, I guess, leading, that's a very nice word. But yeah, I feel like, we've been, really lucky to be in a position where we are now. It's been a long time. I've been interested in architecture and design in general my whole life, right? So I guess, you know, from the starting point, being interested in architecture, you know, mainly through my family, was really a launch pad into, you know, really being able to understand creativity and constructing environments and the impact it could have. But I think kind of early on in my career, I was really lucky to be surrounded by some really great mentors as a student, as a graduate of architecture. You know, people that just had a really optimistic outlook on life and really understood that, you know, design has a place in society that's much more powerful than a purely sort of aesthetic outcome. And I think those sort of founding thoughts and mentorships really had a huge impact on how I kind of perceived design and creativity, and also internally for me being quite interested in multiple kind of subcultures beyond architecture and interiors, fashion, music. There was a lot of interest in my life that you know, I felt could be, you know, I really wanted that to be part of my career. Traditionally, you know, especially when I started, architecture was very much a singular kind of profession. It was very focused in, you know, just producing and thinking about things in one singular way. So for me, the early part of my career was really navigating that and going, well, I feel like there's other ways to introduce a diversity in the work. And, you know, I guess being able to foster some amazing and early clients that gave me the opportunity to express some ideas that were a little bit unconventional. So like, for an example, early on, one of the most pivotal clients that I had was Belinda Sieper, who was a really amazing retail powerhouse in the 80s and 90s and 2000s, pre kind of online shopping, but she was incredible in terms of like helping steer my career and really broadening my horizons about how to view design. And almost, you know, for her as a retailer, you know, her experience was to take, you know, this is before people were shopping online, before people were traveling. Her experience was about transporting her customer to the Prada showroom or the Miu Miu showroom in Milan, or taking them to the, you know, out of her little studio in Double Bay, like being able to transport her clients to another magical world. And it wasn't about a service. She was providing more of an experience, right? And she was a leader in that. And she was able to, she always said to me, it's not about giving people what they want, it's about giving them what they need, right? Or, you know, kind of reversing the whole service thing and going this and really cultivating that and pushing boundaries. So I think, you know, she was my first fashion client, and she said, you know, she asked me if I had any experience in retail or fashion. I said no, but I like shopping, I like exploring, I like fashion. She said, perfect. She said, I'll teach you everything you need to know about the fundamentals of designing a store and all of the boring things, but ultimately it's about creating experiences. And I guess, you know, the loyalty that I built with her and the trust, and our relationship to creativity, you know, there were things that are really brought on board and fostered through, you know, our whole kind of creative journey. So yeah, that's something we really bring into our work on a daily basis, is really wanting to build the trust with clients, have strong design values, and for the clients to really value our work, to really see eye to eye with our clients. That's important. I feel like design and creativity is a gift, right? I always had an innate awkwardness when I started my business, because I felt very uncomfortable, I guess, commercializing creativity. Like, for me, it felt like it wasn't work. I just enjoyed the conversations, enjoyed doing the work, which is obviously a struggle as a business owner. So yeah, that's something that only in the last 5 years I've really sort of started to go, okay, you know, you need to run a business, Kelvin. You need to make sure you know.
Yeah.
You know, for me, design was like, it's such a valuable resource, and obviously the delivering the resource, the delivering design is I guess the second part of that. So we're really, you know, conscious about who we work with, making sure we're aligned. We want to work with best in class, you know, with the clients that you mentioned. And I think probably most importantly, the thing that has got us to where we are now as a company with Akin is really, you know, we've got an amazing team. So past and present people, so the people here in the office with me now, the people who have come through the doors and have contributed to this. You know, I'm a huge advocate of collaborating and fostering talent, and making sure that there is a journey beyond the office and working here. And there's, you know, some people that have worked here and moved on to create their own businesses and have hopefully taken some of the experiences from here, and they'll go on to create, you know, even more amazing opportunities and experiences than I have. So that's, you know, one of the, you know, fundamental things for me is like fostering a really creative and, you know, collaborative studio environment. So hopefully all those things have kind of led to where we are now.
Well, I think especially with what you're saying, obviously the gift that you were given, you're now then sharing that on through how you're mentoring your team and influencing what they do. For me, like the things that just in what you're saying, how powerful it is that, you know, values, integrity, collaboration, loyalty, all those things that, although, you know, it is a commercial business, how it supports the creative and how those other aspects that are much greater than, you know, I guess, what we create on a daily basis and how that can enrich a broader experience is really, is everything.
Yeah, definitely.
One thing I want to ask is that, you know, historically, we know that innovation and creativity can rise up during times that challenge us as humans. What do you believe the role of innovation and creativity has during times like this?
Well, I guess, you know, for me, I really enjoy working with limitations, and I think that's you know, probably, you know, for you as well, or broadly in the design community, when you have really kind of fixed limitations, either positive or negative, and, you know, I think a really strong designer can take those limitations, either spatially or budgetary or timing, and really, you know, question those and turn those into positives. And obviously now we have an overlay of challenges of, you know, there's so many things going on out there that we have to acknowledge those as well in how we design and how we innovate. But I think the role is continually education, feeling relevant, making sure we understand the context we work in, and having the right tone during that, you know, to understand the climate that we are in. I think there's an opportunity to really shift patterns and consumer habits. I guess one of the, you know, interesting parts of my career was when we started working with Merivale, one of our first jobs. There was a big shift in, there was a bit of a downturn in the economy. People weren't as freely sort of spending money going out. They were much more conscious about how they spent their money. So we were really put a lot of thought into it. And it was more of a natural progression because part of me really enjoys challenging, you know, what the current status is on things. But, you know, we started working, you know, this would have been 10 years ago, and we were, even in retail or, you know, hospitality, you know, both the examples of where we started to introduce materials or seating arrangements or fixtures or things that just felt a little unconventional, and also made people feel good. You know, we created these spaces where people go to these restaurants and go, oh, wow, you know, it just feels kind of fun and playful, and I don't have to feel so uptight. You know, and they can see that, you know, we might have bought some lights from Bunnings or, you know, just really kind of cheap, playful things. And I think the accessibility and vulnerability in the design kind of let people just feel better about going out and not as guilty. So, yeah, I think, yeah, definitely positive vibes is such an important thing for design. And yeah, more than ever, yeah, it's a complex one, definitely. But yeah, I think, definitely limitations are an important part of any process. And I think it's going to be really interesting now with so many more limitations coming into play, how it'll shape the industry.
Definitely. Tell me, what drives you creatively?
I oscillate. It could be anything. Like my friends are a continual source of creativity. I've got friends that are just doing so many interesting things. Like I like to look at a lot of art. I like to read books, music. Being like nature's a big inspiration. Definitely, I'm enjoying. I used to be really super inspired about going to, traveling and being in metropolises like New York or Tokyo, but more and more I'm finding like isolation and separation being a much more powerful motivator.
Yeah, it's amazing how that has so quickly shifted with obviously the experience that we've all been through. There's been a desire for humans to try and predict what the future holds. A lot of discussion around that now more than ever before. And while none of us have that ability, how do you think human behaviour will impact the way in which we interact and experience environments? Like, how do you think, I guess, the current circumstances are going to change the way that we conceptualize and design in the future? And
yeah, I think there's I talk about it with a lot of my friends in the industry, and it feels like we were moving at such a rapid pace. We were just, producing these projects, and it was just this sort of constant, grind of not thoughtless, but it just felt like we were, it was just this sort of cycle that we were on. And I think in the like right now, it's an opportunity to really reassess. I think definitely like we felt, what I've observed and maybe in some of our projects when I reflect is, I guess, a kind of a singularity in design in terms of its functional needs is a challenging one. Like I look at, we recently did a lounge in collaboration with our friends at Kelvin Studio for Qantas. And it was an amazing project and an amazing creative process. But then, suddenly that's just sitting there and it can't be used for anything else now. So I think there's definitely going to be some level of multiplicity or flexibility in design moving forward. Maybe it's got to be more open and more flexible, more horizontal in a way. I think there's there's just been a huge shift. Like previously, like everything was just going vertical, everything's going much more compact, everything being denser. Yeah, I think right now, like everything we're doing is much more, it's just like space, everything needs space now. Negative space is so important. So I think between that and also the idea of just spaces being more laid and spaces having to work harder to provide those experiences, and spaces not feeling like they're just having one sort of singular function.
yeah, so flexibility and I guess favouring negative space over critical mass, which has always been that desire to create a buzz through that shoulder to shoulder interaction, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's the kind of challenge we've got now is like how to, how to still promote that interaction and socialization without that friction between people. Positive friction. Yeah.
Which leads me to the next one, the big question. How do you think the impact of social distancing will be on the way that we interact and congregate in hospitality and retail environments?
I guess it's a bit of a retraining of our brains. I feel like there's a natural coding to the way humans kind of interact with space. There's always signals and triggers and things that I think people are naturally coded to socially distance. Like if you look at patterns of the way people occupy a public space, will occupy a bus or a train, they'll naturally, if you watch people, how they will occupy a space, it's just a natural separation. But at the same time, that we know that the most sort of fundamental human need is that sort of socialization and interaction. And I guess we're really lucky to have the opportunity to provide those spaces like, restaurants or hotels or places or public places where people can kind of interact and, feel inspired or feel motivated or feel, happy coming out of some of our projects. But I feel, social distancing is going to have a huge impact. I don't think we feel quite like there's so much. I feel like we need to play this out a little bit further, just to kind of observe where it really takes us, because it's going to have a huge impact on our work. Because I'm a huge believer that all these sort of triggers in the built environment can have a positive, and they can be so kind of tiny or insignificant, like simple things like seeing like hand sanitizer on a table or seeing a marker on the floor. All those things are reminders of, the situation we're living in. And that's a delicate balance because, as you know, like when we're trying to curate spaces and create experiences, like you just want to have people, just in a certain state of mind. So it's how to, I guess, subliminally or reshift how all of those markers, because those triggers, like I think people see them and they kind of automatically makes people kind of tense up, and it's a reminder of, what's going on. So if there's a way of kind of encoding those into the environment that feel more passive and a bit more, more playful or funny or whatever it might be, and that's going to be a huge impact on our work, how to incorporate those elements. I think materially, like, we're looking into how particular materials have properties that are better suited, in this sort of COVID sort of moment. But yeah, it's going to have a huge impact, like things like coat hangers, fitting rooms, point of sale. It's like there's just so many touch points. And, we've always just loved to create environments, especially in hospitality, where you can have people sitting really closely together. And that's one of the most wonderful things that we love about hospitality, is just those chance encounters with a stranger or being with your friends. So I guess we're not quite out of it yet. I feel like, we're looking at a whole bunch of floor plans at the moment and going, how can you still kind of cultivate that nice experience but still have that social distance?
So at the moment, from what I understand, we're now at 2 square meters for some of the smaller hospitality spaces. Can you just give some context of what that means in how you historically, I guess, would work a square meterage for a design of a hospitality space to where we currently are at? Because I think it's hard for people that are within those spaces to actually understand the impact of that on the environment.
Yeah, as a rule of thumb, we would typically allow, say in a restaurant, 1 person per square meter. But in a bar, it might be 2 people per square meter. So when we're at 4 square meters per person, that's, 4 times as much space that we would normally allow for, 4 times less. Anyway, but we even at 1 square meter per person, which was kind of the rule of thumb previously, that was generally still quite spacious. And so we were often trying to achieve more density than that. That's been a huge challenge also working with our clients, is how to make it sort of feasible for them to run businesses that but it's shifting, by the week, those rates. So I think, again, it's going to be how to work with our clients to create those more malleable environments to be able to shift from 2 to 4 to 1, but still have the same kind of outcome. But yeah, I imagine I know from conversations with clients how challenging it is right now to be able to run a venue with only one person per 2 square meters or one person per 4 square meters, because definitely people aren't going to want, the customer won't want to spend 4 times as much to cover the running costs of a venue.
Well, that's right. I mean, our ratios are quite similar. In a stand-up event, we're 0.5. For sit-down experiences, it's much greater than that, because negative space plays a huge part in our environments. But it certainly is a consideration when still wanting to create an energy in the space as well. Look, while we of course understand the impact of the pandemic has been wide-reaching and still is, for the experience industry, it has had a significant impact and still does, as the restrictions are very slowly allowing us to start to create events again. And it's also impacted our clients, our partners. And in many ways, it's reimagining the way in which we design environments and experience and events moving forward. Look, we're closely collaborating, as I know you are too, with clients and partners to work out how we're redefining the way that experiences are playing out, as well as to innovate the design process and the way in which we build environments, as we're doing it right now, but also trying to project, as you said, so many things are still changing, what may play out in the future. So when designing environments, what do you think are the key considerations, like whether it be colour, aesthetics, textures? I know we touched on spacing, but there are so many more aspects that go into the design, as we're looking to also create that safe, practical space, and then be thoughtful and dynamic and inviting and all those things that we want to do when we're inviting somebody into a space.
Yeah, well, I think it comes down again to right now, it's a challenge to get people to leave their homes and feel comfortable. So it's going to have to be a fairly compelling reason for people to want to explore and engage with an environment. So I think the usual devices, and it sort of varies between different projects, but all the things you touched upon, colour, aesthetics, texture, spacing, they're super powerful. And I think we sort of tailor the values of what we play around with, depending on the client. What we like to do is really kind of understand a brand and what they're about, and then really find like what sort of visceral or what sort of tangible experience or sense is really most relevant for that brand. Some brands are more aligned to maybe a play on light or a play on texture or a play on scale, and then how to sort of bring that into and really then bring that into the language or the vocabulary of what we do. As a background, for me, like what kind of got me interested in architecture was, and it sort of is a bit of a roundabout way, but what really got me interested in architecture, I sort of grew up skateboarding a lot in the city. And so as a teenager, it was really about mapping journeys through the city and really kind of exploring and going and experiencing the built environment in a way that wasn't intended necessarily for a teenager to experience. So I would sit on a bus or a train and look at a window, and you would see, a building and its, stairs or a ramp or anything, just these designed elements that, and I could sort of read those sort of visual cues, and I'd go, okay, I can see that visual cue, and that would be exciting. That's something I want to visit. I think that's, so I guess it was for me creating this sort of map of a landscape in my mind about you know, how I wanted to experience a space. So that really got me interested in architecture, was that kind of layered meaning in architecture and design, and the opportunity for someone to create their own journey through a space. So for me, it was really like architecture as a narrative, architecture or design as a narrative or literature, and being able to create stories through a space. So that's something we really try to bring through to the work that we're doing. There's some projects now that are live that are totally being shaped by the climate that we're in. We're working on a really exciting project for the Art Gallery of New South Wales, and that's, you know, as a mindset of being in a gallery, that's a really super physical, tangible, real experience, and it's a heightened sense of when you're in there. It's a really sense of exploration and interaction. So we're sort of like going, well, how do we still create a space within a gallery environment that feels safe and has people really kind of absorbed and transporting people. But yeah, I guess what we're trying to do there is really create this sort of contextually sort of rich experience. So yeah, I think, you know, bringing people together and having having these positive experiences really great, like with multiple people. But then I guess I was thinking about how, you know, if you take away like completely, you know, if you take people away, like coming down to a kind of more of an individual thing. I was thinking about that experience in Japan with the whole, like these ramen restaurants where it became completely about, you know, the singular approach to having ramen, and you get a little ticket and you go into a little booth and then you slide your ticket through a little curtain, and then through the curtain becomes a bowl of ramen, and it becomes purely about you and the ramen. So like, I think those super authentic, like super focused relationships with the space and with the product you're engaging with is really interesting as well.
That completely shifts, I guess, the way that we're so used to experiencing things within people. And I think we've discussed this before a little bit about how it reminds me of like that fine dining experience where it really is about the food that you're eating, and often the lights might be bright, you know, you are spaced far away from other people so that you can focus on what that chef has created. It's, I guess, just, yeah, completely shifting the way that we would normally expect to experience things.
Yeah, definitely.
How, I guess it's sort of an extension of what we've just been talking about, but how important do you think the sensory inclusion is in the design? And is there one sense in particular that you think dominates the most?
Yeah, that's definitely like, sensory inclusion is a massive part of our work. I think especially now more than ever, and it's a powerful thing, like having Pinterest and Instagram and all of those visual tools, because it does help, you know, collate and curate, you know, if we're working with a client or if they want to come to us with their ideas. But yeah, I guess what we're talking about is that, you know, experiences beyond a visual things, beyond purely aesthetics. So there's definitely like senses that can't be experienced purely through a visual means. So like there's brands like, say, Dion Lee that we work with, and a huge part of the experience with working with Dion is really about texture. So the shift, and it's almost like the deprivation of texture versus like the overload of texture. So the kind of collision of spaces within and one space that kind of straddles both in the most extreme. I think a really powerful experience is when, you know, a customer walks in and they're kind of almost stripped of what they perceive as what is normal, and go, oh wow, you know, and it kind of resets their frame of view. And then, so working with the ballet, like there was a the sense that we wanted to play with was, I guess, energy and I guess a self-awareness or self-consciousness. Yeah, so I think it's like for every project, there's a, you know, that's a big part about what we want to introduce, is how to challenge and sometimes invert the senses that, you know, people would normally experience.
Especially when more often than not, the brief will start with visuals, right? So it's how to then make sure that, well, all of the other senses are thought of and considered to really enrich the experiences.
Yeah.
Energy is everything in the experiences that we create, and I'm sure it's the foundation as well for your creations. What do you think are the ingredients from a design perspective to create energy in a space?
Yeah, energy is a massive thing. I think for us, like, if you can shift the idea of the guest or the user of the space, shift them from being an observer to being a participant, I think that's a really important thing, because it means they're engaged, it means they're kind of interacting, and it takes away from them just being a visual interaction to being something much more tangible. There was a piece that was written by Bernard Tschumi. He's this amazing architectural philosopher. He wrote about architecture and violence, and not violence in a bad way, but the idea of it's really important that there's a relationship between the builder and its user, or any space and its user. And that's something that I was really interested in early on in my career, and it was really about how a space can, in both ways, have an impact on between people and the space around it. So as you know, when you're designing an environment, all the devices you do through lighting, through scale, through dimensions, all of that has an impact on the energy of the space. And I guess it does shift between projects, but again, there's all those techniques of, you know, scale, high, low, rough, smooth. I think, again, all of those things, and if you have this sort of strong conceptual kind of overlay that you can bring into the space, I think that can bring like a really wonderful energy. And I think if it's any energy that kind of can shift the participant or the user in that space, is, you know, for me, a really good outcome. Because I feel like, you know, you can have a really kind of average experience where you don't really experience anything. You know, I think it's nicer to kind of shift towards that more extreme end.
Yep. Now, artists can often be identified by like a signature style or a point of view that makes them instantly recognizable. Is there a Kelvin signature that runs through your designs?
I don't think there is, at a sort of a superficial level.
Yeah.
We went through a really interesting journey a couple of years ago when we started to compile, you know, 10 years worth of work and all these different projects that did straddle all the different brands and spaces between hotels, restaurants, private, cultural, public, all those sorts of things. And as a visual kind of map of everything, the outcomes looked really different, right? So there was no real clear, wasn't like there was a consistency in palette or color or anything like that. And I think that really came down to me wanting to kind of take the business to a point where, you know, each project kind of had its own personality and its own specific outcome based on the project brief. But I feel like what I'm more interested in is that there's a consistency in the approach. A huge part of the studio conversation here is really like, what is our narrative? What is our story? And we try to make sure that there is a story that kind of runs through each project, and each story will be different for each project, because what holds the projects together is the narrative. And I think, when we're working collaboratively, like if you can kind of have a shared idea on what that story is, it kind of brings everyone together, and you can really kind of come to that as a launching pad to the final product. So there's that. Again, it comes back for me, like spatial design is like, it's like literature, it's like writing. You create a vocabulary. That vocabulary is based on whatever you want it to be. It can be based on scale, light, materiality, and our role is really to create the words and the paragraphs using the vocabulary, so we can kind of selectively pick what words we want to use. So I think that would be for me, like I'd like to be, see that as the thread. So it's not something that feels immediate if you were to look at our work, but maybe it's something more, I guess, a deeper layer.
Because why you so deliberately refer to it as spatial communication versus spatial design, right? There's so much more depth that comes from that terminology.
Definitely. I think like that's our, we're really lucky that we are, I feel like we are communicators. We are, like I was saying before, everything is coded. Everything we look at, like if you look at anything out there that's produced, there's an underlying meaning in that. What I'm really interested in is that we're able to, put something out there that might represent what we think, but at the same time, I love the idea that someone else can come along and interpret it in a really different way and come out of it with a different experience. So it's a dialogue, and that's what I get really excited about.
Do you often get surprised by how people experience your spaces once you've completed a project?
Definitely. Yeah, I think there's, I'm always amazed at working with, either local clients or international clients, and I might show them a design, and the reception, depending on the experience of that person, where they grew up, the kind of environment they lived in, something that will be a particular cue for me in terms of what it might prompt as a response can be completely different to someone else. So something that I've, thought of that was like something quite playful, like, as a material, like say Pebblecrete, for me it was always about Pebblecrete pools and this sense of this sort of like, Australiana kind of backyard pool, playful experience. As a reference point, was really received quite differently for a client that grew up in the UK, because for them that reminded them of low cost housing and housing commissions, and it was quite a depressing reference point. So I'm always surprised, but I think it's nice to have that dialogue, because I think it's always about beginning that conversation with people.
Can you also tell us a bit about the difference between designing, say, for example, a set for the Australian Ballet versus a retail experience such as Camilla and Mark?
Yeah, I mean, I guess as final products, they're quite different. So I guess the background, that relationship, like we've done probably 10 projects with Camilla and Mark, and they're an amazing brand, amazing people, got a fantastic energy, and they're constantly, pushing us to really, create something new. There's the fundamental things that we have to work through in terms of functionality, changing products, it's seasonal, occupational health and safety, all those kind of things. But again, we try to bring a narrative into it. And with any retail space, it's really that journey and experiencing the product, experiencing the space. So you really almost creating this choreography of people moving through a space, and you know, a narrative with Camilla and Mark is this sense of texture is a big part of it, but also these rooms and using rooms as this sort of classical reference point of creating different zones and different experiences. So that, I mean, as retail, that was, you know, our, you know, that's our strong point. You know, we're doing a lot of that. And then with the relationship with the ballet, how that came about, I was at a dinner, and I just happened to be sitting with, it was a dinner for Vogue, and I was just happened to be sitting with a lady that worked at the ballet, and we just had a conversation about, and I'd been to the ballet maybe once in my life.
Okay.
And she said, "Oh, I'd love for you to come in to," and part of her job was to broaden the horizons of the ballet and to expose it to a broader demographic than just a pure sort of ballet set. So this is probably like 5 or 6 or 7 years ago. So she thought might be quite nice for her team and the creatives in the ballet, at the Australian Ballet, to hear from someone outside of their industry and to talk about their work. So I went down and met with them and presented to the broader team about our work. So I talked about the brands we work with and our design process and the whole customer journey that we've been talking about. Anyway, the creative director of the Australian Ballet, David McAllister, was sitting in that meeting, and he came up to me afterwards and he said, "It's really interesting because the way, as a dancer, as a choreographer, a lot of the notions I'd been talking about in terms of a spatial or architectural process was really consistent with his process as a dancer, the ballet, which is purely about the body, you know, the person creating the experience around them." So he said, maybe we could work together on a project. And I was like, yeah, for sure. I had no idea. I had no experience in set design, but he said, don't worry. And the same conversation I had with Belinda Sieper, which was, don't worry, you'll learn everything you need to know about the fundamentals about set design, but it's more about bringing those ideas in. And that, I mean, that was a really wonderful process because we were able to work on two pieces over 3 years, and there were new commissions with the Australian Ballet that had a huge, it was like an amazing process. But again, it was about a story. Filigree and Shadow was about, we had this narrative about birds in a thunderstorm and the idea of these birds sort of being swept around in clouds and this push and pull of energy, and simultaneously being either part of the energy or going against the energy of a thunderstorm. So the set for that was really about to bring people into that energy, and it was a really singular gesture that really pulled people into the space. So energy was a huge part of that first piece, and the second piece, which was called Squander and Glory, that was a piece that was inspired by a piece of literature written by Georges Bataille, who's a French philosopher. And that was really, I mean, I was thinking about it like it's quite a contemporary or current thought, because it was really about energy. It was really about luxury. It was really about excess. It was really about the idea of society getting to a point where there's just so much production and everything. Then this idea of, you know, luxury, and obviously ballet is a huge luxury in society. I feel like it's a really interesting kind of discussion about where we were, you know, 6 months ago, and suddenly there's been a huge shift. Luxury is a very different idea. So so that piece, Squander and Glory, was really about representing the shift of energy and this idea of luxury and how it kind of can sort of vanish. So yeah, it was interesting that, you know, we did that piece a few years ago, and it feels quite current for the discussions going around today.
Gosh, definitely. Speaking of that, with the impact of the current global circumstances on human behaviour, I think we've all seen a return to core values and people wanting to really connect with in meaningful ways, to stand up for what they believe in. How do you think that's going to impact the creative process and the way that we design and collaborate with each other?
Yeah, well, I think it'll be much more definitely for us about the meaningful collaborations.
Yeah.
Be it with our clients or with our suppliers, or because we know that the final product can be taken away so quickly, right? Things can get shut down. So what is really valuable for us, and where we put our focus on, is more the process and the journey that you go on. And I hope that that's, been a big lesson globally about this whole situation. Yeah, so I think it's about the currency of design. Obviously, it can be monetized, and like I said earlier, that has always been a challenging thing for me, because it never felt like a natural thing. So the currency of creativity is what are the motivators for those collaborations? People are customers are so much more switched on now. They really want to connect with, a huge, in hospitality was really understanding, first part was really understanding where the food came from and the supply chain. And that's going to extend into the built environment. People will want to understand where their timber came from, where the steel came from, who worked in the factories making that, those things. I think the supply chain through the built environment will be a really important part of what people want to connect with, and know where their furniture is sourced from. And also who worked at the companies, like what do the companies represent, what do they stand for? And that's something we're, always like to foster locally. Like we love to work and support, where we can, people that are like local craftsmen or artisans that are, trying to do these more bespoke things. But we've been trying to do that also with our global projects, but right now, obviously, without being able to travel, that sort of international community is a little bit challenged, and not being able to have that dialogue.
And while I guess the local community needs that support and to be showcased more than ever before as well, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So today's topic has been all about delving into what the new spatial experience may be, with all of your experience and knowledge on how humans interact in environments, and how environments can impact human behaviour. Can you share some final thoughts, or words of wisdom on what the new spatial experience may be?
I mean, I wish I had a really new answer for this. I think a big part of, for me, is definitely, constant adjustment, constantly challenging yourself, like either from external focuses or just internally, always trying to adjust and try new ways of working. So I think right now, obviously, there's these huge external pressures that are shifting what a new experience would be. But obviously technology is going to be a huge part of it. But I mean, I'm probably the least technical person out there, so I'll leave that to the experts, but obviously that'll have a big part. But putting that aside, if you're talking about pure experience with a built environment, and assume that we can survive this and we can move through pandemics because we have previously, and we'll learn a lot from this. I think there's, for me, it's just the main fundamental things about, optimism. It's about intimacy. It's about meaning, like being meaningful and authentic. So I think it's just those kind of core foundational values that have been part of the motivators for a long time. I think, as long as we kind of stick to those and adjust and question what they should be, I think that's what the new spatial experience will be.
And to continue to create and design with optimism. I think that's really profound in what you just said. All right, well, we've got some questions that have come through. So I'm going to read a couple of those that they're all keen to hear your answers on them. So firstly, what is something that you always like to incorporate into your designs no matter what? Is there an element that's your go-to?
This is a funny one. I have a particular thing, like with projects, like if you talked about materials, like I'm really try to avoid using a material that's, if it's quite specific or quite like as a, you know, I try to, if I see it on one material board and then turn up on another one, I'm like, no, we should try to avoid that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think at a material level, like for me, it's always about trying to create a new palette, not only for us as a creative process, but also for our clients to hopefully, you know, create these quite bespoke outcomes. Yeah, but I think the kind of consistent element we always try to inject is that narrative. And part of our process is really to distill it down into a few words, a really clear, and doesn't have to be super specific, but just something that, like an artifact, you know, an artifact, a set of words that is the motivator or the driver behind a project.
All right, here's another one. What are 3 tips or ingredients you can share to create positive and meaningful experiences in your home or workplace?
Music.
Yeah.
I think that's a good one. Food. I'm just thinking about our studio. And yeah, like for us is structured times to be able to, yeah, and again, this is probably not a physical thing because like we love to have art and, you know, nice things, nice furniture and nice lights, and we have beautiful light, like all the environmental things that are lovely. But definitely bringing people together is a really important thing. That's a big thing that we're focusing on more on, especially during COVID when everyone was separated. We had all these things like initiatives like this, things like this, you know, conversations are amazing, little presentations, but as we're coming back together, having design reviews, having the ability for people to come together and, you know, either present something they learned on their last holiday, you know, an experience they had, or talk about their favorite book or their favorite chair. They're really meaningful for us because it gives the insight and a better connection with the people around us.
Yep. I'm mindful of time. So I'm now we like to end these conversations with what we refer to as the Fast Five. There are 5 questions and just answer with the first thing that comes to your mind. So firstly, what would be your ultimate project to work on?
Ultimate project. I'm going to have to say it's all of them. We love all our projects, and that's a super cheeseball quick answer. But I honestly just like, there's so many projects we're working on now that are like dream projects. So, yeah.
Fair answer. Who or what has been the greatest influence in your life?
I'm going to have to say Jacqueline.
Right answer. If you could be anywhere in the world right now, pandemic aside, where would that be?
Mallorca.
Mallorca, okay. Nice, relaxing one. What is your most treasured experience?
Treasured experience. Yeah, again, I'd have to bring it back to family. It's a massive thing for me. Definitely time with my kids, like beyond anything, is like the most treasured thing.
Okay. And the last one is, what's your hope for the future?
Hope for the future. Just positivity. Yeah, good energy. Like you've got to put in you should put in good energy, you pull out good energy. So yeah, I think that's definitely got to be my hope. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you so much. Your insights on what spatial design in the future may look like, and how we can move forward with a genuine commitment to creating positive impact through creativity and meaningful collaborations, shared values, all of those things that we've discussed today has really inspired me, and I'm sure many others that are watching today. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Kat. It was so nice to be on board with this, and it's a great initiative, and I've learned a lot out of it as well.
And hopefully at some point we'll no doubt get to collaborate together in the future.
Yeah, definitely. Let's do it. Let me know when.
All right. Take care. Thanks again.
All right. Thank you.
Bye. All right, so look, I hope you all really enjoyed that. I know certainly I enjoyed hearing some of Kelvin's insights, all of them actually. We are now excited to announce our next experience expert, who will be Sam Bumpus of a UK creative culinary agency, Bumpus & Parr. And together we're going to explore the new culinary experience with Sam, and he'll share his insights on how dining experiences, culinary creations and food concepts will evolve in the future. So shortly after this, later this afternoon, we'll share a link to Bumpus & Parr's website via Kat&Co's Insta stories, and you can have a look at their incredibly artful and groundbreaking approach to creating and designing food experiences. Thank you all for joining us, and I hope you can join us again next time. Bye.